Good morning and welcome back to the Morning Endurance Call. I'm Keith Erwood and this is a free daily 15-minute or less leadership ritual for business owners, executives, and preparedness professionals who want to build stronger businesses, think more clearly under pressure, and lead with more clarity in uncertain times. Each weekday morning, we spend a few minutes talking about what it really takes to build stronger businesses, stronger decision making, and stronger leadership in a world where disruption is no longer rare. Today's topic is this: why backups alone are not a recovery strategy. This matters because one of the most common and dangerous assumptions in business preparedness is this: we're fine, we have backups. Now, backups matter. They are important, they are necessary, and in many environments, they are absolutely essential. However, backups alone are not the same as recovery strategy, and that is a key distinction. Because a backup answers one question: does a copy of the data exist somewhere? A recovery strategy answers a much bigger question, such as how do we restore recovery capability, in what order, and within what time frame, with what dependencies, and using what people, systems, access, and decisions, and in a way that allows the business to actually function again. That is a very different standard, and that is also why backups alone are not enough. A business can have backups and still be poorly prepared for a real disruption, because the presence of data alone does not automatically mean that the business can recover well. Data may exist, but can it be restored quickly enough? Can the data be trusted? Can the right systems run on it? Can the right people access it? Can dependent applications function properly on it? And can the business use it in the order and sequence needed to resume critical operations? Those are real questions, and that is where the gap often appears. Now, one of the reasons this misunderstanding is so common is that backups feel tangible. Leaders hear, yes, we back up everything, yes, it is replicated, yes, it is stored off-site, and yes, we have cloud backups. And that sounds reassuring. But backup capability and recovery capability are not interchangeable. A business might have great backup retention and still struggle badly during a real outage if the recovery order is unclear, the infrastructure is not ready, identity and access fail, ITDR recovery plans and runbooks are outdated, restoration takes too long, data integrity is uncertain, dependencies are missing, or the business has never validated what recovery really looks like under pressure. That is the issue. Backups are a component of recovery. They are not the strategy itself. And this distinction matters because it shapes leadership assumptions. If executives believe backups equal readiness, they may underestimate how much real work is still required to make recovery credible. That can lead to underinvestment, false confidence, weak testing, and unrealistic expectations during an incident. That is expensive. So let's make this practical. Why are backups alone not enough? First, because restoring data is not the same as restoring operations. A backup may give you a copy of information, but the business needs more than data. It needs usable systems, functioning workflows, access paths, dependencies, communications, and decision making. A system may have data restored successfully and still not be ready to support business activity. that matters. Second, because recovery requires sequencing, and not everything comes back at once, and not everything should. A strong recovery strategy understands what is most critical, what must come back first, what dependencies must be restored in advance, and what the business can tolerate temporarily. Backups alone do not answer those questions. Third, because dependencies matter. A backup may exist for application. Backup may exist for an application, but what about the database? What about the network connectivity? What about authentication? What about integration points? What about reporting tools? What about upstream and downstream processes? What about vendor connections? And what about access credentials? If those things are not ready, the existence of backed up data does not solve the real business problem. Fourth, because recovery time matters. A backup may be technically recoverable, but how long will it actually take? That is where many assumptions break down. The fact that something can be restored eventually does not tell you whether it can be restored within the time the business actually tolerates. This is why business consequence matters so much. If a critical function becomes unacceptable after 8 hours, but practical recovery from backup takes much longer, the business is carrying more exposure than leadership may realize. And fifth, because testing changes everything. A backup that has never been meaningfully tested in realistic recovery conditions may provide more comfort than certainty. It is one thing to say backup exists. It is another to demonstrate that it can be restored correctly, in the required order, by the right people, within the needed time frame, with the right dependencies in place, with the business actually able to resume operations. That is a much more meaningful standard. This is why I often say, backups protect data, recovery strategy protects business capability. That distinction is incredibly important. Now, let's talk about what a real recovery strategy should include beyond backups. A recovery strategy should include clear recovery priorities, defined recovery order, understanding of business critical functions, knowledge of key dependencies, realistic time expectations, access readiness, usable runbooks, clear roles and responsibilities, validated communications, decision authority, manual workaround thinking where appropriate, and testing that reveals what recovery looks like in practice. That is recovery strategy. It is broader, it is more operational, it is more leadership relevant, and it is much more aligned to real business consequence. Now, I want to make an important point here for leaders. You do not need to become technical experts in backup architecture, but you do need to understand the difference between backup confidence and recovery confidence. Those are not the same. Backup confidence says, we believe the data exists. Recovery confidence says, we know how the business would restore critical capability in a credible way under pressure. That is the stronger standard. And that is why leaders should ask better questions. Not just, are our systems backed up? But, what does recovery actually require? What order would systems need to come back in? What dependencies could slow recovery down? What access issues could block us? what has actually been tested, what business function would still be disrupted even if the data were restored, and how long would practical recovery really take? Those are far better leadership questions because they move the conversation from storage to survivability. And this connects directly to IT disaster recovery, business impact analysis, and maximum tolerable downtime. A BIA helps clarify what matters most and how long disruption can be tolerated. Maximum tolerable downtime helps define when consequence becomes unacceptable. And IT disaster recovery helps determine how technology supports restoration of critical business capability. Backups support all of that, but they don't replace any of it. And that is the point. And this connects directly to endurance. Because endurance in business is the ability to continue operating, make sound decisions, recover intelligently, and keep moving forward under pressure over time. Backup support endurance, but only as one part of a larger recovery capability. A business does not become enduring simply because copies of data exist. It becomes more enduring when leadership understands what recovery truly requires and prepares accordingly. That includes strategy, prioritization, testing, dependency awareness, access readiness, and realistic alignment between business expectations and technical capability. That is what strengthens endurance. Now here is a very practical leadership question to ask. If our most critical systems failed today, would having the data be enough, or would the business still struggle because the real recovery path is broader than the backup itself? That question reveals a lot, because most real world recovery challenges are not just about whether the data exists. They are about whether the business can restore meaningful capability in time, in order, and under pressure. That is why backups alone are not a recovery strategy. They are important, but they are not the whole answer. So here is today's leadership takeaway. Backups are necessary, but they are only one component of recovery. Storing data is not the same as restoring business capability. That is the distinction. So here's today's leadership question for you. Does your organization have confidence in its backups or confidence in its actual ability to recover the business? That is an important question, because the difference between those two is often where hidden exposure lives. Thank you for joining me today on the Morning Endurance Call. If this kind of thinking is useful to you, join the free endurance community. That is where I'm sharing additional resources, tools, live learnings, and ongoing conversations for business owners, executives, and practitioners who want to build stronger businesses through preparedness, leadership, and endurance. The link will be below in the description. Tomorrow we'll talk about recovery time objectives versus reality, because recovery targets sound good on paper, but are far less proven in practice. Until then, think clearly, prepare deliberately, lead with endurance. Thanks for joining. Bye now.